Good morning, and let's go to Genesis chapter 19. Last week we left off at verse 23, but to provide context, we'll go ahead and read through the entire chapter, but we'll start discussing it at verse 23. One of the things that's distinctive about verse 20, or the section starting at verse 23, the end of chapter 19, is why is that there? I think time will allow today for us to roll right into Genesis chapter 20. And again, one has to ask, why is that chapter there? But we'll discuss that. We'll discuss why these portions of Scripture are here, because they seem oddly placed. They seemed like we could have just skipped them. And honestly, I think it's interesting that from the pulpit, these portions of Scripture are often skipped, are not talked about, because they're icky or they're strange. So they're often not talked about because, is it a positive message? And what does it mean? What's the so what? What does it mean to me? Kind of things. That's what preachers do when they try and relate scriptures to the congregation. They want to answer those questions. What is the so what, and what does it mean to me? Sometimes portions of Scripture are there to set something else up, to clear up something else, and I think that's what we're going to see here today. All right. So turn with me to Genesis chapter 19. Again, we're going to do a read through the whole chapter, but then we're going to go back and start discussing in verse 23. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. 2 angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. "My lords," he said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then go on your way early in the morning." "No," they answered, "we will spend the night in the square." But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may have sex with them." Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him and said, "No, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you want with them. But don't do anything with these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof." "Get out of our way," they replied. "This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them." They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness so that they could not find the door. The 2 men said to Lot, "Do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place." The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, "Hurry, get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy the city." But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." When he hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, "Flee for your lives, don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away." But Lot said to them, "No, my lords, please, your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life. But I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die." Look, here is a town enough to run to, or near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared. He said to him, very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it. That is why the town is called Zor. By the time Lot reached Zor, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Lord from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he withdrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and returned to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah, towards the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land, like smoke from a furnace. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought out Lot of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. Verse 30. Lot and his 2 daughters left Zor and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zor. He and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. One day the older daughter said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is no man around here to give us children, as is the custom all over the earth. Let's get our father to drink wine and then sleep with him and preserve our family line through our father." That night they got their father drunk with wine, and the older daughter went in and slept with him. He was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. The next day the older daughter said to the younger, "Last night I slept with my father. Let's get him to drink wine again tonight, and you go in and sleep with him so we can preserve our family line through our father." So they got their father drunk with wine. That night also the younger daughter went in and slept with him. Again, he was not aware of when she lay down or when she got up. Both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son, and she called him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites today. The younger daughter also had a son. She named him Ben-Ami, and he is the father of the Ammonites of today. All right, so that is chapter 19. Last week we left off, we talked our way through the end of chapter, or verse 22. Left off at 23, and that's where we should pick up today. All right, so let's take a look here. Verse 23. By the time Lot reached Zor. Now you recall that Zor in Hebrew means small. So Zor was a small town. Matter of fact, it was so small that, Lot was telling the angels, it's really not significant. Would it be okay for us to go there, because I'm not going to make it to the mountain? So can I go to that small town? And will you keep us safe? So the angel allowed Lot and his family to go to the town of Zor. By the time Lot reached Zor, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. So literally, hot, molten sulfur rained down on the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah. When you read the Hebrew, it actually talks of both sulfur and salt, and that the destruction was so complete that God turned up the soil, and that sulfur and that salt got mixed in with the soil so that the cities would remain devastated, that no vegetation would ever grow again. That's how complete the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was. God wasn't messing around. He had heard the cries of righteous people. And it's interesting to think, we think back to chapter 18, when the angel of the Lord, pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus, when he tells Abraham that they are about to destroy, or they're on a research mission, a fact-finding mission to determine if they're going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, because the cries that had reached him were so great. He wanted to make sure that the evilness of the town equaled the outcry that they had heard. Where did that outcry come from? Remember the negotiation, right? Abraham starts with the angel of the Lord and says, well, would you destroy the righteous with the unrighteous? Would you destroy the city if there were 50 righteous people? God said, no, not for 50. For 50, I will not destroy it. And so Abraham says, okay, all right, I've got my parameters here, right? I've got something to work with. Well, what for 40? So he took the next step down, right? Took 10 down. Well, what about for 40? Would you destroy the city for 40 righteous people? And the angel of the Lord said, no, not for 40. Well, okay. So what about for 20? No, not for 20. Well, what about for 10? No, not for 10. And then Abraham stopped, right? Because he's counting, and likely Lot, plus his wife, 2 unmarried daughters, sons-in-laws, other daughters that were married, probably equaled about 10. So he didn't go any further. So Abraham was able to negotiate for the righteous that are in the town and not destroying the city. But God deemed that the city needed to be destroyed. And of course, it's an interesting side thought that Lot goes out to his sons-in-laws that are betrothed to marry his wife. Marry his daughters. And he tells them that the Lord is about to destroy the cities and they need to get out. And they thought that he was joking, so they did nothing about it. When we get there, I think there's some interesting aspects of why Lot's wife turned to a pillar of salt. All right, so the angels have gotten the righteous out of the city. And then the city is destroyed, and the destruction is so complete, that God salted the ground with the sulfur that rained down from heaven. And archaeologists believe that they have found the areas in the Jordan Plain where the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah previously existed, and nothing is there now, and nothing grows there. And they find rocks that are singed, that have obviously been in some sort of fire. Just kind of interesting. By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Remember, this whole situation of destroying the city started at dawn. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of heaven. So the reason that that's mentioned there is that they want to be clear that the Lord is the cause of this raining down on Sodom and Gomorrah, this burning sulfur. Have you experimented with sulfur? And the reason I say that is that sometimes sulfur is experimented in high school or used in high school science or chemistry classes. I experimented with sulfur when I was younger. I had a very complete chemistry set. It was great. It was awesome. My parents had gotten me that for Christmas one year, and it had a lot of chemicals, and I bet that a lot of those chemicals you wouldn't be able to have in a kid's chemistry set today. I just think so. And part of that was sulfur. One of the things you could do with sulfur is you could ignite it. You could burn it. It would make a sticky tar substance when the sulfur became molten. And I can just imagine that sulfur, that burning sulfur, raining down from heaven and sticking to people and burning their skin. It's difficult to wipe it off, right? And it burns so completely. The image that's being created here is that the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was complete. It wasn't done halfway. It was complete. There was nothing left, and nothing is there today. Still to this day, some 4,500 years later, it's still got nothing. There's still nothing there. 25. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. Again, painting the picture of how complete this devastation is. Salting the ground with the burning sulfur so that, and overtilling or tilling the soil, it rained down so hard that the sulfur mixed in with the soil, and nothing will grow there. Verse 26. But Lot's wife looked back and she became a pillar of salt. I don't know about you, but I've always thought that was strange. So she became a pillar of salt because she looked back? Well, remember, they were instructed by one of the angels that delivered them out of the town of Sodom and Gomorrah. They were instructed by one of those angels to leave, to flee, and not look back. What caused Lot's wife to look back? There are several different thoughts about what it was that caused her to do this. What was on Lot's wife's mind? And some say that she longed for her life in Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember that Lot, when he and Abraham, when they parted company, and Abraham said, "Look, you pick it. I don't care where we go. We just can't stay here together. So if you go to the right, I'll go to the left. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. I really don't care. You get to pick where you want to go." And Lot looked over the plain, the Jordan plain. He looked over the plain and he saw that it was well watered. And so he went, "Well, that looks like a nice place. That looks like a place I could be successful. That looks like a place that would support my herds and my people. I'm going to go there." Now, he could have gone anywhere within that space. And likely he had his herds on the outskirts of town. He had purchased land, acquired land on the outskirts of town. But, boy, where the opulent city was, where the important people were, where all the action was in the town of Sodom. And that's where he decided to live. So he likely had property on the outside of town for his herds, but he built his house in Sodom. But now remember, Lot was a righteous man. And it's likely that the outcries that got to the Lord's ears, that he heard about the unrighteousness, the sinfulness of the people in the town of Sodom, towns of Sodom and Gomorrah, likely those outcries were coming from Lot. It's likely that Lot was the one who was crying out to the Lord and saying, "Lord, please, please bring righteousness to this place. Please bring us back to you. Please save these people, Lord. They need you now more than ever." It was likely that it was the cries of Lot that the angel of the Lord was responding to, and that it was the catalyst for the fact-finding mission to determine the level of evilness or lack of righteousness in the town of Sodom and Gomorrah. And God, through his angels, before the destruction of the town, delivered Lot and his wife and his 2 daughters out of that town. And that's likely a image or a foreshadowing of the tribulation period and the church being delivered out of the earth, out of the world. I don't know if you can hit that so hard as to make a correlation to the ratios. We don't know exactly how many people were in the town of Sodom. Well, let's just say, hypothetically, that there's a few thousand, maybe several thousand. And the Lord pulled out, delivered, he took away out of the town 5. Interesting ratio. Out of 8 billion people, how many people do you think will be raptured? when that time comes. We don't know. And certainly the Lord tarries because he wants to leave no one behind. No one who has been chosen by him, no one who believes in him, no one who has received salvation, no one who has the mark of God on them. But it's been frequently mentioned, frequently thought that this is likely an image, a foreshadowing of delivering the church, taking the church out of the world, taking Lot, his wife, and 2 daughters out of the world. "25. Thus he overthrew the cities of the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back. She became a pillar of salt." So again, why did she look back? Well, she could have longed for her life back in Sodom, probably led a good life. She probably missed it. But remember that Lot had living at home 2 of his unmarried daughters, and there were likely other sons and daughters. And we know that Lot, by the instruction of the angels, went to speak to his sons-in-laws, those that were betrothed to his daughters, to tell them to get out of the city because God was going to destroy it. But it was only Lot, his wife, and his 2 daughters who were taken out. Matter of fact, it's interesting if you take a look at the wording. If we go back up to at the beginning of the destruction. Let's see. There we go. Verse 15. "With the coming of the dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, 'Hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished.' 16. When he hesitated." This is like Lot thought for a moment about it, right? Who knows what was on his mind? It might be his other sons and daughters that weren't there in his household. "When he hesitated, the men grasped his hands and the hands of his wife and his 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them." The way that this is written in the Hebrew, it's possible that the angels literally took them. They disappeared from inside Lot's house and they reappeared outside the city. When it says that they led them, right, that's really making it more or less supernatural. Making it sound like they fled the city, led them out. But when you read the Hebrew, it's more like they moved them. They went from here to here like that. Back to 25.
Let me ask that question real quick.
Sure, Patrick.
Eric. Human beings are interesting because they can learn to live, amongst. Okay, I'll just use that terminology. A good example would be the Jews that stayed in Nazi Germany in 1933 instead of, running away. They stayed there because they thought they could gut it out. And there's a phrase there when the angels are visiting Lot and he steps outside of his house. And in my version, in your version, I think it says friends. But in my version, it says brothers. So it's possible. Do you think it's possible that he had learned? He was praying for the conversion. I mean, we all do that for our neighborhoods. But at the same time, he became somewhat maybe comfortable in a very bad situation. And the idea of leaving was really causing him to have great hesitation, and the angels kind of forced the issue.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think you're
Yeah,
absolutely right.
yeah,
Like I said before, Sodom was the original Sin City. It was bright lights, big city. It's where things were happening. It was nice. It was opulent, and it was the place to be for most people. And I do think that Lot hesitated, and for a moment there, even though he longed for righteousness, I think he hesitated there because they had made a life there. They were comfortable. And it's very much an image of the believers, Christians in the world today, right?
yes,
So
yes,
once we receive Christ as our Savior and we become new creations, we're not pulled out. It's not we're not pulled out of the world at that point. We have to stay in the world, and we have to remain salt and light. We are required to be in the world, but not of the world. And I think that that's one of the failures of the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah, is that there even the righteous had become unrighteous. Even the righteous had been pulled down to the level of the other people in the town and in the city. So, yeah, to your point, yes, I do think that Lot's hesitation was just a brief moment when he was considering what they were giving up in the comfortable life that they had become accustomed to.
yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to verse 26. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. So again, like we were talking about with Lot, I think Lot's wife looked back. She stopped in their fleeing, which they weren't supposed to do. They were fleeing. They were told to keep going until they reached the town of Zoar, because this was going to be bad. And she stopped, and she turned around, and she looked at Sodom, and she likely was thinking she was going to miss their old life. She was thinking about the sons and daughters that they left behind. But then she was turned to a pillar of salt because she went against the word of the Lord. She went against the directions that they had been given. They could have reached the town of Zoar, and they could have stopped and thought about what they had left behind. But she stopped while they were on their way when they were fleeing. Then we have a scene change here in verse 27. So the scene changes from Lot, his daughters, and his wife fleeing, and his wife looking back and turning to a pillar of salt. We have a fade dissolve, and the new scene opens, and we're looking at Abraham. And it's morning, and Abraham is standing there, and he's looking over the land. Verse 27, early the next morning, Abraham got up and returned to the place where he had stood before the Lord. So remember when he and the angel of the Lord were having this conversation, they're looking out over the plain of Jordan at the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah. The Lord tells Abraham, yeah, we're here to determine whether or not we need to destroy those cities. Why did God do that? So that Abraham would not be shocked. He would not be asking a question, why did the Lord do that? He would have known from the very beginning what was on the Lord's heart and mind, what his intentions were. Now, the next morning, Abraham gets up. He's looking over the land, and he returned to the place where he had stood before with the Lord. He looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah, towards all the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land, like smoke from a furnace. And when you look at the Hebrew, it says furnace or kiln. So the Hebrew word there can be used for both. Now, a kiln, right, is a type of furnace that you get up to such a great heat that you can cure pottery, right? That's how hot it was. It was as hot as a person at that time could conceive. He saw dense smoke rising from the land like smoke from a furnace. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. Now, interesting question about this verse. So we discussed earlier, and it was the topic of my email that I sent this week, and that was Lot a righteous man? Well, we know from the passage in 2 Peter that Peter calls Lot a righteous man. And we don't often think of Lot as a righteous man because of the next thing that happens at the end of this chapter, but that's not actually Lot's fault. So is Lot's righteousness, was it imparted to him, was righteousness imparted to him because of Abraham? And there are passages that talk about when the head of the household gives his life to the Lord, that the entire household is saved. Now, we do believe that salvation is an individual thing, that each person has to come before the Lord. Just like we're all individually going to stand before the throne of judgment, each of us has to work out our salvation with God individually. However, there are references in the Bible, and like this, where it appears that the righteousness of the head of household is imparted to the rest of the family. So I don't think that this is an or. I think that this is a yes and. So it's actually both at the same time. So it is the case that both Abraham's righteousness was imparted to Lot. Also, that Lot was himself a righteous person. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the city where Lot had lived. And so it was the case that when the day before Abraham was speaking to the angel of the Lord, there are three angels present. One of them was the angel of the Lord, pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. And Abraham is negotiating for the destruction of the city and not destroying the righteous with the unrighteous. He was negotiating for Lot's life and the lives of Lot's family. All right, now we move on to the latter part of chapter 19, which is one of the stranger portions in the Bible. There are a few very strange portions in the Bible. There's a really strange portion at the end of the book of Judges, or towards the end of the book of Judges. Well, this is one of those strange portions. And like I said earlier, this is often not talked about from the pulpit. It's skipped over because it's icky. It's ugly. It's strange. Lot and his two daughters left Zoar and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. Why was he afraid to stay in Zoar? Because the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was so complete. Remember, Lot asked if he could go to the small town of Zoar, because he didn't think he could make it to the mountains and survive. So they go to the town of Zoar, but Lot won't stay in the town. He's too afraid to stay in the town, and so they live in a cave. Lot and his two daughters left Zoar and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. He and his two daughters lived in a cave. One day, the older daughter said to the younger daughter, "Our father is old, and there is no man around here to give us children." Now, I think that that's an interesting phrase. No man is around here to give us children. Going through what they had experienced with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities of the plain, they believed that the world had come to an end. And they were the last people left. There's no one else around. No one to marry his daughters to. No one to father children so that they could keep the family line going. Remember, when we study the story of Abraham and Sarah, or Abram and Sarai, that one of the worst things that you could experience is not having children. That was considered to be a curse. So that's why Sarai allowed Abram to sleep with her handmaiden to have a child, because that was the next best thing, right? So now if you couldn't have your own kids, which was the best thing, then the next best thing was to have a child who would be a half-blood of the mom, right? Um, a child from the hand, because they own the servant, right? And legally, they owned the servant. So it's still their child, because any child that was born under servitude became one of their possessions. So that was the next best thing, was to have a child through a servant. It wasn't what God wanted. It wasn't what God planned. It wasn't what God intended. And it is not what God wanted or intended here in this passage at the end of chapter 19 either. But it happened. Our father is old, and there is no man around here to give us children, as is the custom all over the earth. Again, put this into context. They think the entire world has been destroyed, and they're the only people left. Let's get our father to drink wine and then sleep with him and preserve our family line through our father. So this is the brainchild of Lot's oldest daughter, because it was considered to be the worst thing, a family curse, if you weren't able to have children to keep the family line going. Verse 33. That night they got their father to drink wine, and the older daughter went in and slept with him. He was not aware of when she lay down or when she got up. So they got Lot so drunk that he had no idea. He blacked out. He had no idea what was going on. These two girls were implementing their plan. And the oldest daughter went in and slept with her father and then becomes pregnant. And then says to her sister, all right, so now it's your turn. The next day, the older daughter said to the younger daughter, last night I slept with my father. Let's get him to drink wine again tonight. You go in and sleep with him so we can preserve our family line through our father. So they got their father to drink wine that night also. And the younger daughter went in and slept with him. Again, he was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. I think that's important, right? We sort of lump this strange situation, this family tragedy, on Lot. Lot, where he's culpable here is he started drinking wine, and his daughters kept his cup full, and he kept drinking to the point that he blacked out. If he hadn't drank the wine, the situation wouldn't have occurred, likely. But the daughters, they were manipulating him, right? It wasn't something that he did on his accord, right? They were manipulating him. And because he had blacked out, he was not aware when his daughters came into him and laid with him. And then later they got pregnant. So verse 36. So both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son, and she named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites of today. The younger daughter also had a son, and she named him Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites today. So why is this here? Why is this in our Bibles? We could have gone an entire lifetime without ever seeing this. Why is this here? The answer is right in front of us why this is here. And the answer is Genesis is the book of origins. And this is placed here because it explains where the Moabites and the Ammonites come from. It explains their origins. Why is that important? Notice the wording. And who is the author? Moses is the author. He says he is the father of the Moabites of today. She named him Moab because he is the father of the Moabites of today. The younger daughter also had a son, and she named him Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites of today, because Moses is preparing the Israelites to enter the promised land, the land of Canaan, and these peoples were some of the peoples there, and he was explaining where they came from. That's the reason. That's why this is there. It seems ill-placed. Like I said, we could have gone our entire lives without ever seeing this. But again, Genesis is the book of origins. It's where we go to explain where we came from. All right, let's turn to chapter 20. Turn the page to chapter 20. Now we have an entire chapter that when we read this, you will ask yourself the question, why is this here? We went from having a portion of scripture that made us ask, why is this here? We have an entire chapter. It seems like it's ill-placed. It seems like it didn't have to be here. But it did. It did have to be here. First off, there isn't a single thing in scripture that is there by accident. That's the first thing. Second, it has a definite purpose, a definite reason that it's here. Let's do our read-through of chapter 20. Now Abraham moved on from there into the region of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. For a while he stayed in Gerar. And there Abraham said of his wife Sarah, "She is my sister." Then Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent for Sarah and took her. But God came to Abimelech in a dream one night and said to him, "You are as good as dead because of the woman you have taken. She is a married woman." Now Abimelech had not gone near her. So he said, "Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Did he not say to me, 'She is my sister'? And didn't she also say, 'He is my brother'? I have done this with a clear conscience and clean hands." Then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you did this with a clear conscience. So I have kept you from sinning against me. That is why I did not let you touch her. Now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not return her, you may be sure that you and all who belong to you will die." Early the next morning, Abimelech summoned all his officials, and then he told them all that had happened. They were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham in and said, "What have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you have brought such a great guilt upon my kingdom? You have done things to me that should never be done." And Abimelech asked Abraham, "What was your reason for doing this?" Abraham replied, "I said to myself, there is surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is really my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God had me wander from my father's household, I said to her, 'This is how you can show your love to me. Everywhere we go, say of me, he is my brother.' Then Abimelech brought sheep and cattle and male and female slaves and gave them all to Abraham, and he returned Sarah's wife to him. And Abimelech said, 'My land is before you. Live wherever you like.' To Sarah he said, 'I am giving your brother 1,000 shekels of silver. This is to cover the offense against you before all who are with you. You are completely vindicated.' Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female slaves so that they could have children again. For the Lord had kept all the women in Abimelech's household from conceiving because of Abraham's wife Sarah." Another strange chapter. uh, one that asks you, why is this here? But it has a definite reason of why this is here. Let's go back up to the top and start to unpack it. Now Abraham moved on from there into the region of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. Where did he move from? He moved from Hebron. Remember, where he was living previously was near the great trees of Mamre in the area of Hebron, on the south end of the land of Israel that we know today is as Israel. Then it would have been land of the Canaanites. And I've always thought that it's interesting that where Abraham is trekking, right, where God had Abraham travel, where God led him, was in the same place that later was going to become the promised land, the land promised to the nation of Israel. Abraham, father of Israel, promised land is in Israel, kind of goes together, right? So now Abraham moved on from the area of Hebron, from there into the region of the Negev, which is the desert, and lived between Kadesh and Shur. For a while he stayed in Gerar. And there Abraham said of his wife Sarah, "She is my sister." Then Abimelech, the king of Gerar, sent for Sarah and took her. There's a few interesting things here. Abraham did just as Abraham did when he and Sarah were in Egypt. And he told Pharaoh that his wife, Sarah, was actually his sister. He did not tell a full lie. He told sort of a half-truth because she was his sister, but she was also his wife. And now we meet this character, Abimelech, king of Gerar. And Abraham tells him the same thing. Oh, this woman with me? Why, she's my sister. Again, he's not telling a whole lie, but he's not telling the whole truth either. Then Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent for Sarah and took her. Sarah is now almost 90 years old, and she is still a beautiful woman. She's attractive and desirable, and the king always took the most attractive women for his harem. So because Abraham said that she was not his wife, but his sister, Abimelech thought he was clear to take Sarah into his harem. Likely what happened is the ministers working for Abimelech said, you know, this guy Abraham, he's moved in. It's kind of looks like he's settling down. He has a really attractive woman living with him. And so Abimelech inquires about the woman, and Abraham says, she is my sister. And Abimelech thinks that he's free and clear to take Sarah into his harem to eventually become one of his wives. Now, this guy Abimelech, kind of interesting. He is the king of Gerar, so he's king of that area, that region. And Abraham makes an assumption that he doesn't know God, that he's not a God-fearer, that he's an idolater just like everybody else around here in the land of Canaan. Except that wasn't really true in Abraham's experience either, because he had run into Melchizedek, and Melchizedek was a priestly king, and he had met no one like him before and gave him 10% of the spoils of war. But Abraham makes an assumption that Abimelech is going to be a godless man. He's going to be an idol worshiper. He's not going to know the true God. He's not going to know Jehovah. Verse 3. But God came to Abimelech in a dream one night. It's no fanfare here. It's no setup. It's no like, even though Abimelech was not a God-fearing man, God came to Abimelech in a dream. Just says But God came to Abimelech in a dream one night and said to him, "You are as good as dead because of the woman you have taken. She is a married woman." Whoa. God frequently spoke to people in that time and era and place in dreams. God is still meeting and talking with people in the Middle East in dreams. He is still doing that today. We hear stories about rabbis having dreams about Messiah coming. This is not an uncommon thing. But God came to Abimelech in a dream one night and said to him, "You are as good as dead because of the woman you have taken. She is a married woman." So now God is telling or revealing to Abimelech something he did not know. Verse 4. Now Abimelech had not gone near her. So maybe he knew that she was added to his harem and she was actually probably in training, because they always put the women in training. This is what the king likes. You gotta know where our king came from. You gotta know his likes, you gotta know his dislikes. When you enter into his presence, you need to act like this. So she's probably at the point of being trained. Same thing went on with Pharaoh and in his harem. And it's happening again. But Abimelech had not gone near her. She was in training, but most likely. Now Abimelech had not gone near her, so he said, "Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? What is this about?" And then we'll see here in a minute that Abimelech's advisors, they were scared stiff. Why? Because they know about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? They know what God had done there. And they didn't want that to happen to them. Verse 4 again. Now Abimelech had not gone near her, so he said, "Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Did he not say to me, 'She is my sister'? And didn't she also say, 'He is my brother'?" Wow, what an awful thing that Abraham has done here. And we'll read about this here because Abraham comes clean. He explains it all. He explains his motivation and why Sarah would have confirmed that Abraham was her brother. "She is my sister, and didn't she also say, 'He is my brother'? I have done this with a clear conscience and clean hands." I thought that it was something that was okay for me to do. I didn't know that there was any foul play here. I didn't think that there was anything wrong or torrid here. Verse 6. Then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you did this with a clear conscience. And so I have kept you from sinning against me." So God is saying, yes, I know that you have a clear conscience. I know that that wasn't your intent. I know that you didn't know that Sarah was actually Abraham's wife. And that's what's kept me from killing you so far. Verse 7. Now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. This is important. So Abimelech understood the concept of a prophet of God and the protection that God would provide for his prophet. Now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. So God is obligating Abraham here to pray for Abimelech and for his life. But if you do not return her, you may be sure that you and all who belong to you will die. That's pretty ominous. God talking to you in a dream. Think I'd be listening. Verse 8. Early the next morning, Abimelech summoned all his officials, and then he told them all that had happened. They were very much afraid. Why? Because they too knew what God did to Sodom and Gomorrah. Then Abimelech called Abraham in and said, "What have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you have brought such great guilt upon my kingdom?" This Abimelech's an interesting character. He is a God-fearer. He knows of Jehovah. He knows Yahweh. And character is important to Abimelech. What have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you have brought such guilt upon my kingdom? You have done things to me that should never be done. And Abimelech asked Abraham, "What is your reason for doing this?" And now Abraham comes clean. He comes clean. He explains what's going on in his head. Abraham replied, "I said to myself, there is surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife." So he assumes that they do not know Jehovah here. He assumes that they're pagans like everybody else around. He assumes, get the emphasis on assumes, he assumes that Abimelech is not going to have high moral standards. Abraham replied, "I said to myself, there is surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she really is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God said to me, 'Wander,'" now I don't like the word wander here that the NIV's translated, but travel would be better. Literally, God told Abraham, "Lech lecha." Lech lecha means get out. Wander sounds kind of passive. It wasn't that way. God said, "Go." And Abraham was obedient and he went. And when God had me wander from my father's household, I said to her, "This is how you can show your love for me." Oh my gosh, ouch! This is how you can show your love for me. "Everywhere we go, say of me, 'He is my brother.'" Abraham put that burden on Sarah. And as an obedient and faithful wife, she did as her husband asked. Wow, that's really nasty. When you think about it, that's really nasty. He put that burden on Sarah. Sarah obviously knew the truth. And Abraham made Sarah participate in his lie because Abraham was afraid of his life. Sarah was such an attractive woman, he was afraid that people would kill him just to take Sarah. And because of this fear in Abraham's heart, he forced Sarah to join him in his lie. And when God had me wander from my father's household, I said to her, "This is how you can show your love for me. Everywhere we go, say of me, 'He is my brother.'" This is a huge failure for Abraham. He did not protect Sarah. He wasn't protecting his wife. What is it that a woman wants in a relationship? She wants security. She wants protection. She wants provision. Abraham provided the provision, but he didn't provide the security and the protection. 14. Then Abimelech brought sheep and cattle and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham, and he returned Sarah, his wife, to him. And Abimelech said, "My land is before you, live wherever you like." He's telling him, as he's standing, right, in his palace, and he's telling Abraham, "I don't care where you go. You can go anywhere in my land. You just got to get out of here." Why is he paying him to leave? Remember that Abraham and Lot received herds and slaves and wealth from the Egyptians. They paid Abraham to leave because Abraham caused a problem with his lie. Abimelech, he's saying, I'm going to pay you to leave here because I want no party of this. My hands are clean. My conscience is good, and that's going to stay that way. You need to get out of here. I'm going to pay you to leave. There's also the possibility that when God told him that Abraham is a prophet and he will pray for you and you will live, that he's paying Abraham forward to pray on his behalf as a prophet of God. But nonetheless, Abimelech said, my land is before you, live wherever you like. To Sarah he said, I am giving your brother 1,000 shekels of silver. This is to cover the offense against you before all who are with you. You are completely vindicated. I want to make it clear. I never touched you. My motives were always pure. I didn't know he lied to me. I didn't know you lied to me. I want you out of here. I want to make sure everybody knows my hands are clean, and I'm going to give your brother 1,000 pieces of shekel so that everybody knows my motives were pure. You are completely vindicated. You have no contractual obligation to me. You don't have any moral obligation, no legal obligation. You just need to leave. Verse 17. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech. Why? What had been going on? Nobody was getting pregnant. Nobody was having babies as long as Abraham and Sarah were there. God was cursing the people because of Abraham, because of Sarah, because Abimelech had taken Sarah to be in his harem. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female slaves so that they could have children again. For the Lord had kept all the women in Abimelech's household from conceiving because of Abraham's wife Sarah. Wow. Do you see the impact there that Abraham's lie had? It was impacting Abimelech's whole household. All right. Now, as we're wrapping up, why is this here? Couldn't we have gone, through the whole story of Genesis without this chapter? The answer is no, we couldn't. Because this chapter is all about unresolved sin. And there is unresolved sin in Abraham's life. And when there's unresolved sin in our lives, it keeps God from being able to bless us. And we're not going to read it today because we're going to go into it next week. But if you turn quickly to chapter 21, what happens? What is chapter 21 about? Abraham and Sarah have Isaac. God had to resolve the sin in Abraham's life before he could bless Sarah and Abraham to fulfill the promise of giving them a son, before the blessing of providing his heir. You get that? The unresolved sin in Abraham's life was keeping God from being able to bless him. And previously, God had told Abraham, by this time next year, you will have a son. And that couldn't happen because God wasn't able to bless Abraham with that unresolved sin in his life. And that's why chapter 20 is there. And then we move forward into chapter 21, and we have the birth of Isaac. Closing thoughts, comments?
Abram has moved because when Moses comes out of Egypt, he travels through all that area.
Yes, right. What else?
Well, it is strange that this is happening twice. that Abraham calls Sarah his sister, both in front of the Egyptian king and then Abimelech. And I mean, it's just amazing. First of all, that a woman 90 can be that beautiful, and then secondly, that this happens twice.
Exactly. I agree, John.
Well, they were living a long time back then. Some of them were living 200 and 300 years. So
Not at this point. So this is post-flood, right? So they're only living no more than 120 years.
okay.
Yeah, she's definitely old now, but she's still a beautiful woman. She's still attractive enough for a king to think about taking her as his own.
I was going to say, I came across something with one of the commentaries I was reading, that Josephus made a note in his writings that he actually went and saw the salt pillar that was Lot's wife. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yes, for for hundreds of years, there was a salt pillar that people they called it Lot's wife. That was the name of the salt pillar. Yeah. True story. All right, gentlemen, thank you again for being here this morning. Please have a good rest of your week and go with God.
Thank you, Perry. Same to you.
Thanks, Perry. Thanks.
Thank you, Barry.
Take care, guys.